Hello everybody, welcome to yet another video. This time it's not live, it's recorded. Last live session I said I would offline take a look at putting our trivia game into the cloud, into Heroku to be exact. So I did just that and I want to show you what I did to do it. On my website buildfunthings.com I already described in length the steps that I have taken, but I thought it would be good to follow up with a video as we're all just watching my videos as we're going along. It's very, it turned out to be quite easy, most part. First thing to take into account that is that Heroku works with something called a 12-factor app philosophy. The applications that you push onto Heroku should adhere to some form of guidelines, and the most important one is that all the configuration is within the environment. If you're used to very large projects in Java or .NET, it's very uncommon to put things in the environment and to run based on that. There's an entire shift in the industry with regards to that, especially the microservices architecture brings it along. Is that 12-factor apps, there's a lot of services that run small applications, services that you can just use for free with certain limitations, like Heroku. And they center around this idea of having something that you can deploy, that you can define configuration and in environments are not dependent on external resources. You just see them as attached resources to your system. And this is quite something to wrap your head around. For us, our trivia game was very tied to our local development area. We could run it on port 3449 in Figwheel, and we can run it locally on port 8080. Turns out I made a mistake there as well. So there's a couple of things we need to fix. Most importantly, if we go into our project file, we have an environ library which allows us to read the environment. And why do we need a library for it? Well, environ allows you to read variables from a layer of files. Firstly, a line env file. If we look at close your environ, there we go, beautiful. It takes a line env file, which is actually generated during the build cycle locally. We will get to it in a little bit. The same goes for the boot build system. We don't use it, but we could. Environment variables and actual Java system properties, which are properties that we can pass along on the command line when we start our application. So it allows for a combination of all these, which makes it a very suitable library. It also has a counterpart, a companion, if you will, called line environ, which we also use. And it's right here. This allows us to utilize some parts of Leiningen within the environment part. And most notably is that we extend our profiles, which we already defined within Leiningen, to have something called dev overrides. It's just a name. It could be Aryan. It could be something called environment variables. I called it dev overrides. And so instead of just having this map being the value of dev, it is now a factor of first dev overrides and then the settings that we already had. And where do we get this dev overrides? Well, we use profiles. Profiles. Here we go. Profiles. It's a standard Leiningen functionality, but we now enhance it by using line environ. In our def overrides, we define an environment, and in that environment we have some properties. The app version was for me to try out. It's not really relevant to our project, but we have our course, which contains our list of host names that are allowed to connect to our backend service. If you remember, we actually pass along the host and the port as well for our web server. If you remember, those are properties passed along to the system, which passed along to the components, and the component will then use those to start up and break down. What happens when we run Leininger now using the line environ plugin? We actually get this line env file, which is basically the first thing environ will read to actually get access to some data. So you see that it has the app version, which is actually the project version of the file. Then there's also the course, the host, and the port, as we already defined it. There's strings, so we need to take that into account when we read them. Everything we read from the environment is a string. So it means we need some small adjustments to our code. But if we look at our core code, we see the dev system, and it did not change a lot, except for that we now read from the environment. We read env host, and if we do this right now, it will read development, which is the thing that was passed along to it. And in order to read the port from the environment, we will get a string. That string needs to be converted to an integer, but when there's no value, it will be nil, and we don't want a port of nil. So if there's no value, we pass a default value of 80. So if we run it, now it will say 8080. If we do a non-existing key port, it should return 80. So that's the environment library, and it works. It's very simple, and it just works. All you need to do is require environ core and refer the env key. The other part where we use it is actually within our web server. Right? In our web server, we also include the environ library, and we actually used it for the course definition. Right? Here within course, we had a list of 2 regular expressions, one for 3449, one for 8080, and now we need to grab it from the environment. The wrap course library actually expects a vector of regular expressions to match requests on. So we need to change that list, that string of a list of host names to this list of regular expression patterns. So I created a new function called build course list, which when it's empty will just return an empty vector. But if it's not empty, we will split the input on the regular expression comma, which is just a string split. Then we map over this list using the function repattern, and what that will do, it will create a regular expression that can be used to perform regular expression matches. With this list that we get from map, we actually tell Clojure to put that into a vector. So what happens when we do this, we do build, I need to learn how to type, build course list 1, 2, and we will get a vector of the regular expressions 1 and 2, right? Which is the same as what we had before. So using with these small adjustments, we now are fully based on the environment. And then I did one last change. If you remember from the last session, the summary video really, I added an environment setting to our closure script code, so that based on the host name or basically the environment, we will have a different host name to which our API is running. Because in development we want to run in Figwheel, and the API is actually on a different port. So for dev, I just create the API reference called with the URL of the port 8080/API, and if we locations in production, I actually use the JavaScript properties for location to build a reference to the entire current URL, and then just attach /API to it. Which also brings me to the error I had in the build file, and it's kind of silly, but when we created a Uber jar, we had this AOT all already built set there, so we have a lot of optimizations. But what the build failed to do is to actually include the JavaScript files from the closure script code. And that was due to not having a closure script built when you do just a UberJar compilation. It used to work just fine because the JavaScript code was already there, but in a clean environment it would not be. So we just added the prep tasks, which does a minified closure script build once before doing the UberJar packaging, and that means that it will actually add the closure script files to the jar, and then when it boots up it will have full access to the environment. Well, now that we have our application changed to work in the cloud, so to speak, how do we get it there, right? Well, I choose to use something called Heroku. And as you see, I've created a personal app called Build Fun Things. And this looks like a collection of applications, really, because I activated something called the application pipeline. I want to have a staging environment. I might want to have a production environment. And so when you actually do, let's create a new one, create new app. Let's call it Testy. It should be lowercase, okay. Testy. It's not available. It has to be a unique name. Test Arjen. That should be available, right? Test Arjen is available, and runtime selection where you can choose a region. Let's choose Europe. Let's do create app. I actually built fun things in the United States, but here you can see that it says, well, there's a ability to create a pipeline. Let's do that, new pipeline, and let's just call it Test Arjen, why not? It will actually create a pipeline, and now Test Arjen becomes a collection of Heroku instances. It will have the one that we already created right there. And now let's, how do I move it? An existing I want to move it. Oh, move to staging. There we go. Move to staging. Now it's part of the staging area. And we could create another Heroku instance for the production environment, right? So now that we've seen how to create these are free. This should also change to a pipeline. All right. These are free. These applications, these droplets, if you will, are part of the free tier. So you can do this without having any credit card, just to play around with it. Downside is that they will go to sleep. They will suspend the instance when it is not used after 30 minutes, I believe. So it takes a little while to boot up, and then it shuts down again, and it boots up again. In the free tier, you have 550 hours of usage, so that should be plenty to just test the stuff, right? So for now, that's fine. The build fun things, we could do deployments and stuff like that. But what we want to do, we want to do it automated. When we do a check-in, just push it there and add it to our application. When you run your application, you need to have config variables. You need to have those environment variables available to the system. And we needed host, port, and cores. Host and port are not really needed because port defaults to port 80 if it is not set, and host will default to nil, which will default to this machine or this instance. But cores we need because our application will otherwise not be able to actually call the API. So we only need to set the config variable cores, and we set it to buildfunthings.herokuapp.com. So we now have this instance configured. There is a command line client, as I said, that you can use to just try out things for yourself on your local machine. But as we already have a continuous integration going on in GitLab, and we have this GitLab CI, we should actually use that, because then once we do a check-in, we can do, it does a build, it tests it, and if it's correct, it should move on to a deployment onto our staging environment. And then when we're fully satisfied and we've tagged our build, we want to have a production deployment. We don't have a production deployment yet, but as you can see, the GitLab CI, it changed a little bit. I moved the before script, which was at the top, into the test area because it was all about testing. And the change that I have ready right now is to actually use the Phantom.js from a file that is already part of the repository, because my build started failing because Bitbucket was not able to pass along the file that we needed. So that was quite annoying, and I figured I would fix it by just including it from my own project. And then we will do a deps uberjar test and do phantom test once. And once that test step is completed and successful, it will go to a staging step. I gave it a type deploy, so in the pipeline, here we go. You see that it is in the deploy stage. It failed in the deploy stage, so we can have another type of deploy, production, and then that will be passed along here. It will do an update of the machine, and it will actually install some Ruby stuff. Most importantly, the Ruby gems. And we need that for the tool DPL, deploy. Because then we can say deploy using provider Heroku on the app build fun things using the API key, and that's a variable. So how do we get that variable there? Because you don't want to actually include your API keys into the version control, because then anybody can do anything on your account, and that would not be very good. So in project, there is actually, where are you? There's this thingy here, which is, and it has variables right here. When you click it, you can add a variable to your project, and you can just call it Heroku staging API key and pass along the Heroku API key that is within your account settings. I will not show mine because then you can just upload your own stuff to my machine, and that would not be very good. There's this only key, and it says master, so only do this when there are check-ins to the master branch. You can also say only tags, and then only do it when there is a tag. So what should happen when we do a commit? Save the file, yes please. As of course, yes, very good. We will add the assets, which is my binary file for Phantom.js that I already added, and there's the diff that we did is to deal with the new binary file, and we cleaned up the project a little bit. So let's stage these two changes. We'll do a commit, and say add Phantom.js as a project asset. And then all we need to do is push, and we push it to GitLab. And this will take a little bit of time because there is the 20 megabyte file. And then when we go into GitLab, we shall see that there's a pending build, probably. It is pending, so if we click it. This takes a long time. The resources available for a integration build are not extensive, so it gets queued, then it gets executed, and our build takes a little bit of time because we do a UberJar build, then we do a test cycle, then we do a Phantom.js test cycle. Then I do a lot of tests right now, but it is something that has to be done. And then from test it goes to deploy. So in order to save a lot of time, we will just do some magic cutting, and we will progress to where the deploy happens. All right, so now we're at the staging area. I had some coffee in the meantime because we're 10 minutes in. The build was stuck in a pending state for a little while, which is not too bad, but if you're waiting for it, it takes, it's a pain in the ass, right? So what you see now is that it runs the GitLab CI multi-runner, and then it actually calls a Docker instance. So if you would want to, you could recreate this environment, all these steps in a local Docker instance, which would be quite interesting to do really, because the keys and stuff are all the same. So it's pulling it. Looks like it will take a little bit of time. So let's see you after the break again. All right, we're at the point where the deployment to Heroku will finally start. As you see, there's actually a push going on now, and it says deploying application. And if we go into our application pipeline right now, we will see that there's a building app going on. We can view the log. And we see that actually is doing the line UberJar at the moment and compiling all the different components. Then it's going to do the compiling closure script, which is the prep task that we added to our lining and build. Well, it does all the things, blah, blah, blah. It should not take too long, I think. Famous last words, right? Let's see. Maybe we can press expand output, have some more insights. The screen is a little bit bigger. It should be quite somewhat easier to see. The closure script compilation and the minification and optimization, not in that order, but actually takes a little bit of time. Here you see it took 41 seconds. Now it's actually creating the trivia jar. and it will actually create two, one trivia minus 0100001 snapshot, and the other one being trivia.jar, and then it will have the trivia jar available to run. So how does it know what to run? In our project, we have something called a proc file, which says it's a type of instance is a web, and it will run a Java command with Java options, which will be set by Heroku, using a jar called target uberjar trivia.jar, which is exactly what this is. So that's this path, and this proc file will actually cause Heroku to instantiate that jar. It says proc file declares types web. Well, that's correct. We have a web server type thing. And compressing our artifact is now a whopping 120 megabytes, and that's due to the dependencies on HTTPKit and the closure stuff. It's not that scary really, but it sounds really whopping, 120 megabytes. As you can see, it's released version 10, and it says, well, you can now give it a try. So let's do just that. We can probably say open app in browser, and then we'll give 404 because we did not take care of this yet on our side. We need to instantiate index.html. We say hello, that's my name. Let's open up development console. In network area, when we do create new game, we should see a call to build fun things Heroku app /API /question /1234, exactly as we wanted. So what did we accomplish? We have our application running in the cloud, publicly available for anyone to try. So you can go to this URL and do it yourself. And it does not cost us anything at the moment. It's in a free tier, so it will go to sleep. It is limited, but we were able to just say from a check-in to our version control, we did an integration test, or a test in our continuous integration system, and then we did a deployment to our staging area, and it all succeeded, and it is a wonderful piece of technology if you look at it like this. So you should give it a try. It concludes this video because we're full circle. Next Friday at 10 a.m. Central European Time, we will continue the live coding sessions, and any enhancement we do to our system will now also be reflected on our staging build fun things. I hope you enjoyed it. Check in coming Friday. If you have not done so already, press the subscribe button down below. It's greatly appreciated. If you like it, if you like the content and you like the to learn Clojure and ClojureScript, also like the video so that other people will know that it is being liked. If you have any questions, drop a comment below. You can also reach me on Twitter at CREDMP. And if you want to check out any of the articles I wrote about this for some more in-depth information, check out buildfunthings.com. And until next Friday, where I hope to see many of you again. Goodbye.